They say the most dangerous people are the ones who master themselves, and for Sigma Empaths, that moment changes everything. Because once they stop reacting, stop absorbing, stop apologizing for their sensitivity, something shifts inside them. Their emotions no longer control them. Their intuition stops overwhelming them. And the parts of themselves that once felt like weaknesses become calculated, steady, and impulsively sharp. The question is, what happens when the person who feels everything finally learns to control everything? It starts quietly. They become selective with their energy, harder to manipulate, possible to guilt trip, and immune to emotional chaos. People who once relied on their softness suddenly realize they can't access it anymore. People who depended on their empathy discover that empathy is now filtered through wisdom. And the Sigma Empath, who once tried to save everyone, becomes someone who sees through everyone. Self-control turns them into the exact thing people don't expect: calm, unreadable, strategic, and unshakably powerful. Before we go deeper, answer this in the comments. Has gaining self-control made you stronger or more distant? Write the word control if you're ready to understand the transformation Sigma Empaths go through. And subscribe so you don't miss the truth hidden under the surface of every Sigma Empath story. They stop reacting emotionally, making them impossible to manipulate. When a Sigma Empath reaches the point where their emotions no longer sit on the surface, everything about the way they move through the world shifts. They no longer give people the satisfaction of visible reactions. No flashes of anger, no hurt expressions, no nervous explanations. Instead, they become still, observant, and internally grounded. This quiet mastery unnerves people who once relied on emotional openings to influence them. Manipulators lose their leverage the moment the Sigma Empath stops being predictable, because emotional reactivity is what most people exploit. But now, instead of reacting to tone, pressure, or guilt, the Sigma Empath watches with a kind of controlled awareness, letting the other person reveal themselves completely before they even decide how to respond. Their emotional neutrality becomes a shield sharper than any confrontation. When someone tries to trigger them, they simply don't bite. They don't explain their boundaries, they enforce them silently. They don't defend themselves, they observe patterns and file them away. They don't get pulled into arguments, they step back and analyze the intention behind the words. And this lack of emotional participation forces manipulators into a panic, because they can no longer steer the interaction. The Sigma Empath's silence becomes the dominant force in the room, and people who once felt superior suddenly feel exposed and unsteady. The empath's self-control transforms into quiet authority, the kind that doesn't need aggression or volume to be felt. With this level of composure, the Sigma Empath starts making decisions not from fear or guilt, but from clarity. They choose who gets access, who gets distance, and who gets removed entirely, and they do it without second-guessing themselves. Their intuition becomes sharper because emotional storms no longer distort their perception. They see motives, not words. Patterns, not apologies. Truth, not charm. And this makes them profoundly difficult to deceive. When they stop reacting emotionally, they reclaim all the power they used to give away. They rise into a state where their presence is calm but commanding, their silence is information, and their self-control becomes the one thing manipulators cannot penetrate. This is the moment a Sigma Empath stops being an easy target and becomes someone you should never underestimate. They control their empathy instead of letting it drain or overwhelm them. There comes a moment in a Sigma Empath's life when the emotional flood that once swallowed them begins to obey their command. They no longer feel every emotion at full volume. They no longer absorb the tension in a room until it becomes their own. Instead, they treat empathy like a tool, something to pick up when needed and to put down when it begins to cost too much. This shift is subtle but powerful. Where they once drowned in the emotional currents around them, They now stand on solid ground, choosing what energy enters their space and what energy gets blocked at the door. And this newfound control transforms them from emotionally vulnerable to strategically aware. Instead of instinctively taking responsibility for everyone's feelings, they begin to separate what belongs to them from what belongs to others. They no longer jump to soothe others' discomfort, fix their problems, or absorb their insecurities. They observe, they analyze, they choose. And this selective empathy becomes a form of emotional intelligence that most people never achieve. Manipulators who once relied on emotional overwhelm to influence them suddenly lose their advantage. The Sigma Empath no longer reacts to guilt, sadness, or anger with automatic compassion. They respond with discernment. They begin to sense when empathy is being weaponized against them, and they withdraw it with a calmness that feels surgical. This is where their danger begins. They stop being accessible to emotional exploitation. Their control also gives them freedom. They no longer carry the emotional weight of every room they walk into. They stop feeling obligated to heal, support, or understand everyone they meet. They save their empathy for people who value it, not for people who expect it. And in this space of emotional balance, their intuition sharpens, their energy stabilizes, and their presence grows stronger. They become the kind of person whose emotional clarity intimidates those who are used to creating chaos. Because when a Sigma Empath masters their empathy, they move from reactive to intentional, from overwhelmed to unshakable, from emotionally exposed to profoundly powerful. And once they reach that level of control, very few people will ever be able to influence them again. Their intuition becomes sharper because emotion no longer clouds their judgment. When a Sigma Empath stops letting emotion blur their inner signals, something extraordinary happens. Their intuition upgrades from a whisper to a razor-sharp instrument. What was once felt as vague unease or quiet discomfort becomes precise awareness. Their mind stops wrestling with, maybe I'm overthinking, because without emotional fog, patterns appear with stunning clarity. They begin to see motives before words, tension before conflict, endings long before anyone admits something is wrong. Their intuition, once tangled with fear, hope, or attachment, becomes clean, a direct line to truth. And people around them feel it. They feel that this person sees deeper, notices faster, and understands more than anyone explains. With emotion no longer flooding their perception, they stop confusing empathy with obligation. They no longer second-guess themselves out of kindness. Instead, they read behavior as data. A sudden shift in tone becomes a signal. A delayed response becomes information. A subtle change in someone's energy becomes a warning. And because their intuition is no longer battling emotional noise, it becomes almost predictive. They can sense betrayal coming before the lie is spoken. They can detect manipulation before the first guilt trip lands. They can feel someone pulling away long before the goodbye. This clarity doesn't make them cold, it makes them prepared. This sharpened intuition also strengthens their decision-making. They don't wait for proof when their inner sense has already delivered the verdict. They don't stay in situations that feel wrong. They don't keep trusting people whose patterns contradict their words. Their choices become cleaner, quicker, and more aligned with self-protection. And this level of insight quietly intimidates others, especially those who found comfort in the empath's former emotional softness. Because now, the Sigma Empath is no longer navigating the world with blurred feelings. They are navigating it with calibrated instinct. Once emotion stops clouding their judgment, they rise into a version of themselves that feels almost prophetic. They walk into rooms already knowing who is honest, who is pretending, who is wounded, who is dangerous. And with this clarity, they no longer react, they anticipate. They no longer question themselves, they trust themselves. Their intuition becomes not just a gift, but a weapon. And that is when they become truly untouchable. They set boundaries with precision, removing access from anyone who misuses it. Once a Sigma empath gains self-control, their boundaries stop being soft suggestions and become exact lines drawn with unwavering clarity. They no longer rely on hope, excuses, or emotional attachment to justify someone's behavior. Instead, they treat access to their energy like something valuable, something that must be earned, protected, and never taken for granted. This is where they become dangerous in the eyes of people who once benefited from their openness. Because the Sigma empath no longer tolerates inconsistency, manipulation, excuses, or emotional imbalance. They don't argue, they don't warn, and they don't plead. They simply close the door, mentally and emotionally, often long before anyone realizes they've been cut off. Their boundaries are not loud. They are not dramatic. They are quietly enforced through their absence, their silence, and their refusal to re-engage with behaviors that once drained them. They stop explaining why something hurt them, and instead pay attention to whether it happens again. They stop giving second chances automatically and begin studying patterns instead of apologies. If someone crosses a line, the Sigma empath doesn't react, they recalibrate. If someone lies, manipulates, or takes advantage of their kindness, access is removed without hesitation or guilt. Their boundaries become a filter that protects their peace and exposes everyone else's intentions. This precision comes from self-awareness. They know exactly what their energy is worth, exactly how much emotional labor they can give, and exactly where their limits are. They no longer sacrifice their needs to maintain harmony or connection. They no longer allow guilt to keep them in situations that feel wrong. Instead, they choose themselves, cleanly, quietly, and with full conviction. People who once had easy access suddenly find themselves locked out, not because the Sigma empath hates them, but because the empath finally values themselves enough to stop bleeding for people who don't notice the wounds. And the shift is unmistakable. When a Sigma empath sets boundaries with precision, they become immovable. Respect becomes mandatory. Manipulation becomes useless. And the relationships around them transform, either by strengthening through mutual trust or ending through revealed truth. Their boundaries are not walls. They are doors controlled by someone who finally understands their worth. And once a Sigma empath learns to remove access from those who misuse it, they step fully into the kind of power that cannot be exploited again. They respond strategically rather than impulsively, shifting every power dynamic. When a Sigma empath reaches the stage where their responses are no longer emotional reflexes but calculated choices, everything in their relationships and interactions changes. They stop being the person who reacts out of hurt, confusion, or urgency. Instead, they slow the moment down internally, studying it with an almost surgical awareness. What used to trigger an immediate emotional response now becomes information, a data point, a pattern, a clue. Their restraint stops being a sign of softness and becomes a sign of control. And people who once relied on their emotional openness suddenly find themselves facing someone who cannot be pushed, provoked, or knocked off balance. This shift is subtle yet powerful. Instead of confronting someone the moment they feel wronged, the Sigma empath waits. They observe what the other person does with silence. They see whether guilt makes them defensive, whether honesty makes them nervous, whether the truth brings out their arrogance or humility. Their timing becomes intentional. Their words become precise. Every response is measured not to win an argument, but to reveal the truth of the situation. Manipulators hate this stage the most because they lose all leverage the moment the empath stops reacting. A calm Sigma empath is a strategic one, and a strategic Sigma empath is dangerous in ways most people don't expect. Their ability to respond with intention gives them mastery over social dynamics. They begin choosing the exact moment to speak, often after the other person has exposed themselves through rambling, excuses, or contradictions. They pick their words with care, cutting through confusion without raising their voice. They no longer reveal their vulnerabilities, their plans, or their emotional triggers. Their impulses are replaced with clarity, their reactions with insight. And this makes people uneasy, because the empath who used to be predictable becomes unreadable. The power dynamic flips quietly, almost invisibly, until one day the other person realizes they are no longer steering the interaction. The Sigma Empath is. In this stage, the Sigma Empath becomes untouchable, not because they dominate others, but because they master themselves. Their emotional discipline creates a force of presence that commands respect without asking for it. They are no longer reacting to the world. They are shaping how the world reacts to them. And once they start responding strategically instead of impulsively, they stop being underestimated and start being feared. They detach from toxic people instantly, without guilt, explanation, or hesitation. When a Sigma Empath reaches the stage of true self-control, detachment becomes their superpower. They no longer linger in situations that drain them, hoping things will change. They no longer give endless chances to people who have already shown their patterns. Instead, the moment their intuition registers toxicity, the manipulation, the disrespect, the emotional imbalance, the subtle shift in someone's intentions, they detach cleanly, quietly, and with a level of certainty that feels almost startling. They don't wait for confirmation. They don't argue. They don't announce their exit. They simply withdraw their emotional investment, energy, and attention in a single decisive move. This detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. The Sigma Empath knows that staying connected to someone toxic only delays the inevitable and damages their own spirit. They've learned through experience that toxic individuals thrive on emotional reactions, explanations, and negotiations. So the Sigma Empath offers none of that. They refuse to feed chaos with their energy. They refuse to justify their boundaries. They refuse to play the emotional games that once trapped them. Their silence becomes their separation. Their absence becomes their answer. And anyone who once depended on access to their empathy feels the loss immediately. The power in their detachment is that it carries no guilt. Sigma Empaths understand now that protecting their peace is not selfish, it is necessary. They no longer apologize for choosing themselves. They no longer feel responsible for fixing people who refuse to fix themselves. They no longer sacrifice their well-being to maintain a relationship that is already poisoning them. Their departure is not emotional. It is logical, intuitive, and final. By the time they walk away physically, they already left internally long before, making their exit feel sudden to others, but inevitable to themselves. What makes this stage dangerous is how quickly and cleanly they can cut ties. They don't create drama. They don't leave doors half open. They don't revisit decisions driven by intuition. Once the Sigma Empath detaches, the bond is severed at its root. And the people they walk away from rarely see it coming because they expected the empath's softness, not their strength. But this is the moment the Sigma Empath becomes untouchable, when they stop fighting to be understood and start honoring the truth their intuition already showed them. Their detachment is their liberation, and their power begins exactly where their guilt ends. They become calm, unreadable, and unshakable, a combination people fear but respect. When a Sigma Empath masters self-control, their presence undergoes a transformation that is as subtle as it is powerful. The emotional transparency that once made them easy to read begins to fade. Their reactions disappear. Their expressions become steady. Their energy becomes grounded, still, and deeply centered. People can no longer guess what they're thinking or feeling, not because the Sigma Empath is hiding, but because nothing external destabilizes them anymore. This unreadable calm is intimidating in a world where most people rely on emotional cues to gauge influence. The Sigma Empath gives nothing away, and the less they reveal, the more power they hold. Their calmness isn't emptiness, it's control. You cannot provoke someone who has learned to sit with themselves. You cannot manipulate someone who no longer needs external validation. You cannot intimidate someone who has already survived their own storms. This inner stability radiates in every interaction. It's felt in their silence, their steady gaze, the way they listen without reacting, the way they choose their words with precision, or sometimes choose none at all. People sense immediately that this is not someone who can be pushed, pressured, or emotionally swayed. And that realization shifts every dynamic in the room. Becoming unreadable protects them in ways emotional openness never could. People who once fed on their empathy now lose their leverage. People who relied on chaos to gain control suddenly stumble in the presence of someone who doesn't engage. People who thrive on emotional reactions feel powerless when the Sigma Empath simply does not react. Their calm becomes a mirror that reflects others' insecurities back at them. Their silence becomes a boundary no one can cross. Their grounded presence becomes a quiet force that demands respect without speaking a word. But the most dangerous part of this evolution is their unshakeability. They stop being moved by fear, guilt, pressure, or emotional turbulence. Their decisions become rooted, their standards non-negotiable, their intuition unquestioned. Even when someone tries to destabilize them, their inner world stays steady. This makes them the kind of person others admire, fear, or both, because unshakable people cannot be controlled. And that is the moment a Sigma Empath becomes truly powerful, when they stop being influenced by the world and start influencing it with nothing but their presence. When a Sigma Empath reaches this level of self-control, they stop blending into the world and start redefining their place in it. Their calm becomes authority. Their silence becomes protection. Their intuition becomes strategy. And the version of themselves they step into is one they were always meant to become: powerful, selective, and impossible to manipulate. If this resonates with you, don't let the moment pass. Lean into it. Own it. Grow from it. Tell me in the comments, which part of your evolution are you in right now? Write the word ascend if you watched until the end. And subscribe for more deep insights crafted for Sigma Empaths who rise quietly but powerfully.